Unboxing. To open the box, remove any staples from the top flap and cut the tape. Carefully lift the bike out of the box and set down gently. Pull out the hardware box and the seat and set aside for now. Cut zip ties to remove the front wheel and handlebars and set aside for now. Remove the protective packaging and store with the bike box in case you ever need to return the bike. Open the hardware box and set aside contents for assembly. Make sure to remove packaging from the saddle. Front wheel. To install the front wheel, first rotate the fork so that it's facing forward. The front wheel of this bike uses a quick-release mechanism. Sit the front fork of the bike onto the wheel. Take the front wheel skewer in the parts box and unscrew the cap. Take off the cap in one spring. Insert the skewer through the hub of the wheel from the left side of the bike. Put the spring back onto the skewer and hand tighten the cap. When hand tightening the cap, make sure that you are feeling a good amount of resistance when closing the lever. Close the lever and the mechanism should clamp down onto the fork, holding everything together. Insert the stem into the bike. Included with your bike is a lock nut cap. Install this part onto the stem before tightening it in place. This helps keep the parts cleaner and provides a smooth look to your bike. We'll come back to this in a little bit. Pedals. Next, we'll install the pedals. Make sure to take note that you are inserting the right pedal, marked with an R, onto the right side, and the left pedal, marked with an L, onto the left side. Using a 15mm wrench, install and tighten each pedal onto the crank. Saddle. Insert the seat post stem into the bike, being careful not to drop the whole post into the bike. If you do drop the seat post, give us a call and we can give you a few tips for getting it out. Make sure that the thinner end is pointing upward. Tighten the seat post with at least a few inches exposed. Install the rear reflector onto the seat post now using a Phillips head screwdriver. Install the saddle onto the seat post and tighten using a 14mm wrench. Make sure to alternate between nuts to ensure an even, tight fit. Handlebars. First, we'll tighten the stem into the frame. To do this properly, make sure that the stem and front wheel align with the bike. Tighten in place using a 6mm Allen key. Next, loosen the bolts on the handlebar using a 5mm Allen key. We generally recommend starting with slightly above parallel to the ground. This can be readjusted in the future. Tighten in place using a 5mm Allen key. Make sure to check that the handlebars don't move by putting your weight down on them. Also, make sure that they don't turn out of place by trying to twist them while holding the front wheel down. Front reflector. Install the front reflector using a Phillips head screwdriver. Fender and rear rack. When installing the fenders, it's important to know that the fender tab and strut should come in from behind the fork. Using a Phillips head screwdriver and 10mm wrench, take the long bolt and fasten the front reflector and front fender tab to the fork. The order should be bolt, fork, fender tab, washer, then nut. You will be using 4 screws to install your rear rack. Take the rear rack and align the 2 arms with where the 2 screws were. There will be 2 screws included in your part box that will fasten the struts of the rear rack to the bike. You'll notice holes where these screws are to be installed. We will be fastening the struts of the rear rack to the uppermost hole. Insert the provided screws through the struts of the rear rack and into the bike, close to the hub of the rear wheel. Hand tighten these to keep the rear rack in place. Using a 4mm Allen key, tighten the 2 screws that fasten the struts and the 2 screws that tighten the arms to the bike. Seven-speed tuning. First, let's check to see if the bike is already tuned, or if it'll need a little work. Shift the bike into 7th gear. Lift the bike and rotate the pedals so that it spins the back wheel. The bike should shift into 7th, the smallest gear. Now shift the bike into 6th gear. Lift the bike and rotate the pedals again. The bike should shift up 1 gear. Continue this process until you get to 1st gear. If the chain moves up 1 level at a time and ends up on the largest gear without going over, your bike is properly tuned. Next, we'll show you how to tune the bike in case you run into any issues. If the chain doesn't move to the smallest gear, or the derailleur doesn't line up to the smallest gear, then we will need to adjust the high limit screw. This is a screw on the derailleur marked with an H. The goal here is to line up the derailleur with the smallest gear while the bike is in 7th gear. If the bike is not shifting onto the smallest gear and getting stuck on the 2nd smallest gear, you will need to turn the high limit screw counterclockwise. Turn the high limit screw marked with an H counterclockwise by a half turn at a time until the derailleur is lined up over the smallest gear. If you notice that the derailleur isn't lined up and is going past the smallest gear, you will need to turn the high limit screw clockwise. Again, do this a half turn at a time to ensure we don't overcorrect. Make sure to periodically lift the bike and turn the pedals to activate the shifting mechanism. If the bike did not shift to the largest gear or did not line up with the largest gear in 1st gear, then we will need to adjust the low limit screw marked with an L on the derailleur. The goal here is to line up the derailleur with the largest gear while the bike is in 1st gear. If the bike is not shifting onto the largest gear and getting stuck on the 2nd largest gear, you will need to turn the low limit screw clockwise. Turn the low limit screw marked with an L clockwise by a half turn at a time until the derailleur is lined up over the largest gear. If you notice that the derailleur isn't lined up and is closer to the wheel than the largest gear, you will need to turn the low limit screw counterclockwise. Again, do this a half turn at a time to ensure we don't overcorrect. Make sure to periodically lift the bike and turn the pedals to activate the shifting mechanism. If, while shifting, you notice that the chain is struggling to move up the gears, struggling to move down the gears, skipping gears, or making a loud clattering noise, then you will need to adjust the tension using the micro adjuster. If the chain is not shifting towards the lower, larger gears, then you will need to turn the micro adjuster counterclockwise. Do this a quarter turn at a time until it shifts smoothly all the way to the largest gear. If the chain won't shift towards the higher, smaller gears, then you will need to turn the micro adjuster clockwise. Also do this a quarter turn at a time until it shifts smoothly to the smallest gear. Handbrake assembly tuning. Let's start with the front brake. First, turn the micro adjuster knob on the left handbrake lever until it is almost all the way unscrewed. We'll come back to this later. Next, we'll check to see if the brake pads align with the wheel. The pad should roughly align with the wheel. To adjust if it does not align, use a 5mm Allen key to loosen the brake pad slightly. While pressing the brake arm against the wheel, manually align the brake pad to the wheel and tighten in place. Make sure to hold the brake pad in place so that it doesn't turn when tightening. Complete this step on the other side as well. Next, we'll adjust the tension cable. While holding the brake arms in place, loosen the bolt securing the brake cable in place. While it is loose, pull the cable until the brake arms are snug against the wheel. Don't worry about it being too tight. We'll adjust this using the micro adjuster. Tighten the bolt and secure the cable in place. Now go back to the micro adjuster on the front handbrake lever. Screw this all the way back in. Give the brake a few squeezes and notice that the brakes should have an adequate amount of space from the wheel. You may notice that when squeezing the brake, that one side makes contact before the other. If this is the case, we will need to make small adjustments to the micro tensioner screw. Go to the brake arm that is making contact first and locate the micro tensioner screw. Tighten this a quarter turn at a time, squeezing the brake lever in between turns to reset the brake until the brake works evenly. Repeat these steps to tune the rear brake. Tires. Pump your tires to the recommended air pressure on the side of the wheel. Most beach cruisers will be set for 30 to 40 psi.